Greetings, dear subscribers and casual listeners of my channel. At first glance, Gryffindor seems like the best house, brave, noble students who are always ready to defend the weak. But if you look closer, you'll notice another side: pride, hot temper, excessive emotionality. Moreover, there are quite a few strange details in the way the house is structured, things that are hard to explain from a logical point of view. Let's take a closer look at them one by one. Enjoy watching. Number 1. Why Gryffindor at all? If you carefully consider the personalities of the main characters, the inconsistencies become obvious. Harry could have been an excellent Slytherin, Hermione would have fit perfectly into Ravenclaw, and Neville would have been right at home in Hufflepuff. The only pure Gryffindor among them is Ron, yet even he often displayed traits typical of Slytherin. Isn't it strange that all the main characters ended up in Gryffindor? Wouldn't it have been more interesting to explore the story from another angle? For example, Harry in Hufflepuff, the House of Outsiders, or Harry in Slytherin, where he would have to face prejudice every day. Instead, Gryffindor ended up at the center of the narrative, the house that eventually appears as the most righteous and the most boring. Number 2. How did Peter Pettigrew end up in Gryffindor? Cunning, cowardly, selfish, and sly, Peter Pettigrew hardly fits the image of a Gryffindor. He is the very opposite of courage and nobility, so how did he end up there? Could it be explained by his own wish to be in Gryffindor? But if so, then what's the point of the sorting hat, if defining traits can simply be overridden by personal choice? In Harry's case, it made sense. He had qualities for both Gryffindor and Slytherin, but Pettigrew was a clear candidate for Slytherin. His friendship with James and the others could have existed regardless. In fact, placing him in Slytherin would have made the story even deeper, highlighting prejudices between houses while showing a friendship stronger than any boundaries. Number 3. Why were they considered outsiders? Before Harry came to Hogwarts, Gryffindor was seen as the house of losers. For 6 years straight, they had lost the House Cup, and their Quidditch performance wasn't impressive either. Other houses looked down on them. But with Harry's arrival, everything changed. Suddenly, Gryffindor became the house of champions, victories in the cup, triumphs in Quidditch, respect from students, and Slytherin's helpless resentment. So the question is, what was that? Why did the arrival of a single 11-year-old boy completely shift the balance of power? Which is the real Gryffindor, the house of outsiders or the house of winners? Number 4. Why did they always win the cup? Before the books begin, Slytherin had won the House Cup 6 years in a row. That seemed logical. The ambition, cunning, and resourcefulness of their students could easily explain their victories. But once Harry showed up, everything changed dramatically. Yes, we know Dumbledore liked to top off Gryffindor's points at the end of the year, as in Philosopher's Stone. But even without that, if you ignore infractions like sneaking out at night, Gryffindor would still have been close to victory. Does this mean it was all about Harry, or did Gryffindor suddenly gain a second wind on its own? Number 5. Why are there so few dark wizards from Gryffindor? If Peter Pettigrew somehow ended up in Gryffindor, why is he the only exception? Why don't we know of other dark wizards who came from this house? The books portray the houses too one-sidedly. Slytherin is always suspicious, dark, but ambition doesn't necessarily lead to evil. At the same time, Gryffindor's flaws, impulsiveness, recklessness, self-righteousness, resemble traits common among many dark wizards, and yet Gryffindor produced only the good ones. Isn't that a little too one-dimensional? Number 6. Where does their confidence come from? Overconfidence is one of Gryffindor's key traits, but what is it based on? Ravenclaw's comes from knowledge, Slytherin's from cunning and ambition. But Gryffindor from bravery? But bravery doesn't always lead to success. Quite the opposite. Their actions often ended badly. So where does their unshakable self-belief come from? Or is it simply supported by a system that elevated Gryffindor to the rank of the main house? Number 7. What's the point of the passwords? To enter the Gryffindor common room, you need to say the password to the fat lady, but isn't that too primitive? Passwords can be overheard, guessed, or simply tricked out of someone absent-minded like Neville. By comparison, to enter Ravenclaw's common room, you have to solve a riddle, a far more reliable system. With Gryffindor, it's surprising that their common room wasn't constantly full of students from other houses. Number 8. Why do they have such blind faith in Dumbledore? For Gryffindors, Dumbledore was more than a headmaster. He was a guide, a protector, almost a myth. Harry's loyalty to him never wavered even when the truth was unclear. "I am not worried, Harry. I am with you," Dumbledore told him in The Half-Blood Prince. Those words sealed the bond. But behind the wisdom, Dumbledore allowed children to face dangers no adult should have permitted: the Chamber of Secrets, the Triwizard Tournament, even the fight in the Department of Mysteries. Yet Gryffindors never doubted him. His choices were not questioned, only followed. Even when the cracks showed, the faith remained. In the Order of the Phoenix, Harry spent half the year angry that Dumbledore ignored him, but the moment the truth came out, he forgave everything. The same was true for McGonagall and the rest of the house. They trusted his judgment even when it put them in peril. Gryffindor seemed to thrive on this blind loyalty, as if Dumbledore's word itself was a shield. Perhaps that is why no one asked the harder question: was their devotion courage, or just another kind of recklessness? Number 9. How do you explain their obsession with Quidditch? For Gryffindor, Quidditch was never just a game. It was identity, pride, almost a battlefield where honor was won. Oliver Wood's obsession showed it best. "This is our year. This is the one we've been waiting for," he told Harry in The Prisoner of Azkaban, as if a school championship carried the weight of a war. Injuries meant nothing. Players like Harry went back onto the field with broken arms, and Wood treated it as the price of glory. Victory in Quidditch was treated as proof that Gryffindor deserved respect, even more than classroom achievements. It became ritual. Matches against Slytherin were framed as duels of morality, bravery versus cunning. When Gryffindor won, it wasn't only about the cup, it was proof of superiority. The cheers in the Great Hall were louder than for academic success, louder even than for heroics in real battles. Other houses loved the sport too, but only in Gryffindor did it take on the weight of destiny. That devotion made Quidditch less a pastime and more a symbol, a mirror of how the house valued courage and spectacle above all else. Number 10. Why are their feats always in the spotlight? Every major victory at Hogwarts somehow carried the Gryffindor name. Harry killing the basilisk in the Chamber of Secrets became a legendary tale, while the silent courage of other students slipped into the shadows. Luna Lovegood, a Ravenclaw, joined every dangerous mission, yet her bravery was rarely framed as heroic. Cedric Diggory, a Hufflepuff, showed fairness and courage during the Triwizard Tournament, but his death was remembered mainly as part of Harry's story. "Take my body back, will you? Take my body back to my parents." Cedric's last words in Goblet of Fire revealed his dignity, yet the tragedy became fuel for Gryffindor's narrative. It feels as though Hogwarts itself shone a spotlight only on one house. The efforts of Ravenclaws and Hufflepuffs were real, but their recognition was muted. Even during the Battle of Hogwarts, when every house fought, it was Gryffindor banners that flew in the aftermath. Perhaps the truth is simple. Gryffindors claimed the stage not because others did nothing, but because the story was written to make their courage the face of resistance. Number 11. Why is discipline so weak in Gryffindor? Discipline in Gryffindor was always strangely flexible. Harry, Ron and Hermione constantly broke curfews, lied to teachers, and wandered into places they shouldn't. The night they went after the Philosopher's Stone is the clearest example. They snuck past curfew, tricked the staff, and battled magical protections meant for adults. Instead of lasting punishment, they were praised as heroes. Dumbledore even awarded them points, erasing the penalty they had earned earlier. The message to every Gryffindor was unmistakable. Rules could bend if bravery was the excuse. Compare that to how Slytherins were treated. Draco Malfoy was often punished harshly, sometimes even for less dangerous acts. When he tried to get Harry in trouble for flying without permission, McGonagall punished Draco as well, showing that Gryffindor's actions were tolerated, but his were not. The contrast was sharp. Gryffindors were forgiven, even rewarded, while Slytherins carried reputations as troublemakers, no matter what they did. Even the professors seemed to join in this pattern. Snape's bias against Harry is famous, but it also revealed something deeper. Gryffindor's misbehavior was normalized. When Hermione brewed Polyjuice Potion illegally, she risked the entire school. When Harry flew a car into the Whomping Willow, he broke the statute of secrecy. Both times the punishment was light. "You and Mr. Weasley were seen by no less than 7 muggles," McGonagall scolded, but the boys still kept their place. In the end, discipline in Gryffindor never had sharp teeth because the school itself seemed to protect them. Number 12, is Gryffindor a house for the chosen ones? Gryffindor often feels less like a house and more like the chosen stage of Hogwarts. Their mistakes, even reckless ones, are quickly forgiven, while others would face lasting consequences. When Harry, Ron, and Hermione broke countless school rules in their first year, Dumbledore simply handed out points and declared them heroes. "It takes a great deal of bravery to stand up to our enemies, but just as much to stand up to our friends," he said, awarding Neville the final points that gave Gryffindor the House Cup. The moment was touching, but it also sent a message. Gryffindor's story was the school's story. This sense of privilege appears again in the Triwizard Tournament. Harry was underage, unprepared, and unwilling, yet once his name came out of the goblet, the entire competition shifted around him. Other students whispered that he cheated, but Dumbledore and the judges accepted the situation without question. Gryffindor was once again placed in the spotlight, the youngest champion in history. Would the same mercy have been extended to a Slytherin or a Hufflepuff? Or would they have been punished for disrupting tradition? Even Quidditch victories carry this aura of inevitability. When Gryffindor won, it was celebrated as the triumph of courage and spirit. When they lost, it was seen as noble effort. Meanwhile, Slytherin's wins were met with suspicion, whispers of foul play and resentment. "You'll be wanting to train hard, Potter," Draco sneered, but no amount of practice seemed to change the story. Gryffindor was destined to shine, even in games that were supposed to be fair. The pattern suggests something deeper than coincidence. Gryffindor is portrayed not just as a house, but as the beating heart of Hogwarts. The bravery of its students is magnified, while the brilliance of Ravenclaw, the loyalty of Hufflepuff, and even the cunning of Slytherin are sidelined. In this way, Gryffindor becomes the house of the chosen ones, where even flaws are rewritten as virtues, and perhaps that is why so many readers feel the school was built to ensure Gryffindor would always stand at the center. Number 13. Why do they always meddle in things that aren't their business? Gryffindors never seemed able to mind their own business. From the very first year, Harry, Ron, and Hermione threw themselves into mysteries that were far beyond their age. The Philosopher's Stone was supposed to be guarded by teachers, yet the trio decided it was their responsibility to stop Voldemort. "We could have been killed, or worse, expelled," Hermione cried, but that didn't stop them. Hundreds of students lived in Hogwarts, yet somehow it was always Gryffindors who acted as though the school's survival rested on their shoulders. The Chamber of Secrets followed the same pattern. When the school was under attack, most students stayed cautious and silent. Gryffindor's trio, however, decided they had to be detectives. Harry alone heard the voice in the walls, but instead of trusting the staff, he led the way into the heart of the danger. Ron stood by his side, and even Hermione, who was petrified, had already been on the trail of clues. Other houses had bright and capable students, but the instinct to interfere to risk everything, was pure Gryffindor. The Forbidden Forest is another example. It was known as one of the most dangerous places in the wizarding world, and yet Gryffindors kept wandering in. First years like Harry and Draco, dragged along unwillingly, found themselves staring at hooded figures drinking unicorn blood. Later, Harry and Hermione returned to the forest with Hagrid on multiple occasions. Where a Ravenclaw might have asked questions from the safety of the library, or a Hufflepuff might have trusted the professors, Gryffindors preferred to dive straight into the shadows. This pattern reached its peak with the Department of Mysteries. Harry's vision of Sirius in danger led him to drag half his house into a deadly trap. They fought bravely, yes, but their interference cost Sirius his life. "It's my fault," Harry admitted in The Order of the Phoenix. That line shows the heart of the issue. Gryffindors act because they believe it's their duty, but their constant meddling comes with consequences. They become the center of every storm, not always because they should, but because they cannot stand still while others do nothing. Number 14. Why don't they have any famous scholars or inventors? Gryffindor is known for producing warriors and leaders, but rarely inventors. When we think of the house, the names that come to mind are Harry Potter, James Potter, and even Albus Dumbledore. They are remembered for battles, duels, and bravery. Yet where are the great magical scholars? Where are the creators who built spells, potions, or discoveries that changed wizarding life? In comparison, Ravenclaw gave us figures like Garrick Ollivander, who perfected wand lore, and Slytherin produced brilliant alchemists and politicians who shaped wizarding lore. Gryffindor seems strangely silent in this field. Take Hermione Granger as an example. She was one of the brightest witches of her age, a student who devoured books and solved problems others could not. "Me! Books! And cleverness! There are more important things, friendship and bravery," she declared in Philosopher's Stone. That line captures the Gryffindor spirit. Knowledge is valuable, but courage overshadows it. Even Hermione, who could have been a natural Ravenclaw, was placed in Gryffindor because bravery mattered more than intellect. Her legacy is not one of invention, but of loyalty and risk-taking. Contrast this with characters like Severus Snape. He was a Slytherin, and yet his talent produced entirely new spells, such as Sectum Sempra, and his improvements to potion-making. These contributions are recorded as intellectual achievements, the mark of a creator. But what did Gryffindor invent? Their history is written in stories of defiance and battle, not in libraries or laboratories. This difference suggests that the Sorting Hat pushed the house's brightest minds away, favoring reckless courage over creative thought. The result is a faculty that celebrates deeds more than ideas. A Gryffindor's place is on the battlefield, not in the workshop. Their culture values boldness so highly that quieter pursuits fade into the background. Perhaps this explains why the wizarding world remembers them as heroes but rarely as scholars. For Gryffindor, creation is less important than the moment of glory, and in that their legacy may be inspiring, but also incomplete. Number 15. Why is courage their main motto? Of all the values that could have been chosen to define an entire house at Hogwarts, it is striking that Godric Gryffindor settled on courage above all else. The Sorting Hat reminds new students every year that Gryffindors are daring, nerve, and chivalry, yet the emphasis falls unmistakably on bravery. This choice has shaped generations of students, marking them with a reputation for boldness and recklessness alike. The discomfort of the question becomes obvious when one considers that Gryffindor is a home for children as young as 11. What lesson does it teach a child to be told before anything else that bravery is their greatest worth? Does it not suggest that safety, caution, and wisdom are somehow lesser or even dishonorable? Already, the foundation of Gryffindor's creed raises more problems than it solves. Take Harry Potter himself, the house's most famous student in living memory. From his very first year, he internalized this doctrine of bravery. In the Philosopher's Stone, he decides to sneak into the third-floor corridor to protect the stone, convinced that someone must try and stop Snape. It is the kind of rash determination that adults would likely discourage, yet Gryffindor's philosophy makes it seem noble. In the end, Harry, Ron, and Hermione nearly die facing a troll, a killer plant, enchanted chess pieces, and Voldemort himself. One cannot deny the bravery, but the deeper question lingers. Should 11-year-olds really be rewarded for risking their lives instead of calling for help? The House. Motto normalizes peril, presenting courage as the highest virtue, even when it borders on childish impulsiveness. The Sorting Hat itself acknowledges this danger in Order of the Phoenix, when it sings that Hogwarts must beware of division. It reminds the school that Gryffindor took the brave ones, while Ravenclaw chose the clever, Hufflepuff the loyal, and Slytherin the ambitious. Already, bravery stands apart because it is not inherently tied to wisdom or patience. A clever plan may save lives, loyalty may prevent betrayal, ambition may build a future. But bravery, on its own, asks for confrontation. It demands stepping forward when others hesitate whether or not the act itself is wise. The Sorting Hat, in its honesty, reveals that Godric Gryffindor's choice was a gamble, elevating courage above prudence, even if it meant endangering those too young to understand the weight of their decisions. Consider Neville Longbottom, the boy who, in The Philosopher's Stone, stands in front of his friends to stop them from sneaking out. Albus Dumbledore praises him, declaring, "It takes a great deal of bravery to stand up to our enemies, but just as much to stand up to our friends." Here is a case where Gryffindor's creed shows its noblest side. Neville's courage is not reckless but moral, springing from integrity and principle, and yet, even in this moment, one must ask, what lesson did Neville absorb from being sorted into Gryffindor? Was it a cultivated sense of justice, or was it an instinct that bravery must be performed even at personal cost? By celebrating bravery. Above all else, the House risks teaching students that risk itself is a measure of worth, regardless of the outcome. The line between courage and recklessness is walked most dangerously by Harry and his peers during their later years. In the Chamber of Secrets, Harry follows the voice of the basilisk descending into the depths of the school without adult backup. His bravery saves Ginny Weasley, but the situation underlines a disturbing pattern. Again and again, Gryffindor students feel compelled to place themselves in mortal danger because their house motto elevates such choices as noble. Would Ravenclaw have taught him to strategize more carefully? Would Hufflepuff have taught him to seek solidarity with others? Gryffindor's culture told him only one thing mattered: bravery in the face of fear. For Harry, bravery was survival. For another, less fortunate student, bravery could mean disaster. One cannot ignore the way Gryffindor bravery often borders on arrogance. In Prisoner of Azkaban, Harry sneaks into Hogsmeade using the Marauder's map and a stolen cloak. This is not necessity, but thrill. A boy convinced that courage entitles him to ignore rules. When he faces Dementors later in the story, his bravery becomes real and necessary. But the house motto does not distinguish between noble self-sacrifice and childish risk-taking. Gryffindor valor celebrates both. That blurred line is what makes the question so uncomfortable. A child raised in such an environment might easily confuse courage with defiance and heroism with danger for its own sake. Hermione Granger provides perhaps the clearest example of how Gryffindor bravery conflicts with wisdom. She is, by every standard, intelligent enough for Ravenclaw. Yet the Sorting Hat places her in Gryffindor because her willingness to act outweighs her caution. In Philosopher's Stone, she insists on staying with Harry and Ron through the challenges leading to the stone, despite the obvious peril. Her choice is not motivated by reason, but by courage. This decision sets the tone for her entire character arc. Time and again, she disregards her rational instincts to stand beside her friends in danger. Gryffindor's philosophy reshapes her brilliance, turning it toward risk rather than preservation. It raises the question, Did the house make her greater, or did it stunt her potential by channeling her into perilous paths? Number 16. Why are their heroes always idealized? James Potter is often remembered as the bold Gryffindor who defied Voldemort 3 times and sacrificed his life to protect his family. Yet if we return to the memories shown through Severus Snape's pensieve, we encounter a far less noble figure. James, at 15, mocked and humiliated Snape simply for amusement. Rowling writes in Order of the Phoenix, James had turned the tables on Snape. He was dangling upside down in the air, his robes falling to his head to reveal skinny legs and grey underpants. The laughter of Sirius and others made clear that this was not courage, but cruelty disguised as bravado. Despite this, James remains a shining hero in the collective memory of Gryffindor, his bullying dismissed as childish mischief while his ultimate sacrifice is amplified as his defining trait. Sirius Black, too, embodies this tension. He is celebrated as Harry's godfather, a brave member of the Order of the Phoenix, and a victim of false imprisonment. Yet the same man once tried to lure Snape to the Shrieking Shack, knowing Remus Lupin would transform into a werewolf. This was not only reckless but potentially murderous. In Prisoner of Azkaban, Remus himself says, Sirius thought it would be amusing. Such an action reveals a vindictiveness that is rarely associated with Gryffindor's heroic image. Still, by the time Harry comes to know him, Sirius is painted as a tragic figure, a man wronged by the world. His darker impulses, bitterness, volatility, and obsession with revenge become footnotes, overshadowed by his role as Harry's protector. Harry himself embodies the paradox most starkly. He is revered for his bravery, his defiance of Voldemort, and his role as the Chosen One. Yet time and again Harry is impulsive, arrogant, and willing to break rules in ways that put others at risk. In Order of the Phoenix, Harry snaps repeatedly at Ron and Hermione, shouting, "I don't want to be human," when they try to reason with him. His anger is justified by grief, but it is striking how the narrative forgives his outbursts while characters like Draco Malfoy are condemned for similar arrogance. The lens of Gryffindor valor ensures that Harry's flaws are softened into signs of passion, never evidence of selfishness. Even Hermione Granger, praised as the most brilliant witch of her age, is shielded by this idealization. Her activism for house elf rights in Goblet of Fire shows compassion, but it is also marked by a dismissive arrogance toward the elves' own voices. Winky and Dobby provide clear examples of house elves resisting her attempts to free them, yet Hermione continues to impose her vision. A Slytherin with similar behavior might be branded manipulative, but Hermione's insistence is remembered as noble stubbornness. Once again, the Gryffindor filter interprets overreach as moral righteousness. Ron Weasley fits this same mold, though differently. He is a character plagued by envy and insecurity. In Goblet of Fire, he abandons Harry when Harry's name emerges from the goblet, convinced his best friend sought glory without him. "You could have told me," Ron shouts before turning away. Such a betrayal, even temporary, is quickly forgiven by readers and characters alike. Yet when Slytherins betray one another, as Crabbe and Goyle ultimately do, the act becomes proof of their innate untrustworthiness. Ron's failure is chalked up to youthful jealousy, leaving intact the narrative of Gryffindor loyalty. The pattern is clear in the way Dumbledore frames the house. Gryffindor is synonymous with bravery, and bravery eclipses all else. Dumbledore himself admits in Philosopher's Stone, "It takes a great deal of bravery to stand up to our enemies, but just as much to stand up to our friends." This line, spoken after awarding Neville Longbottom points, demonstrates how Gryffindor values override moral complexity. Neville's act is framed as heroic, but it also exposes how the narrative prizes courage above fairness, wisdom, or ambition. This weighting ensures that Gryffindors are always cast in the most flattering light. The contrast with Snape is particularly telling. Severus is presented as embittered, obsessive, and vindictive, yet he demonstrates profound bravery in protecting Harry for years. Dumbledore himself says, "You are still determined to protect him?" And Snape responds with his famous, "Always." Yet Snape's bravery never earns him the same adoration as Gryffindor heroes. His bullying of students and alignment with Slytherin are remembered first, while his sacrifices are acknowledged only reluctantly. Gryffindor sins are forgiven. Slytherin sacrifices are doubted. One might argue that the Sorting Hat itself sets the stage for this double standard. The hat tells Harry in Philosopher's Stone, "You could be great, you know, it's all here in your head, and Slytherin will help you on the way to greatness, no doubt about that." Harry chooses Gryffindor instead, associating Slytherin with evil. From the outset, readers are conditioned to view Gryffindor choices as inherently good, even if reckless, while Slytherin choices are inherently suspect, even if logical. This framing makes Gryffindor's flaws appear forgivable, while flaws in other houses are magnified. Number 17. Why don't they have real competition inside the house? In the world of Hogwarts, Gryffindor is often presented as the house of bravery, courage, and loyalty. Yet if one looks closely, a question arises that makes many uncomfortable. Why is there so little real competition within Gryffindor compared to the other houses? In Slytherin, students fight fiercely for power, status, and recognition. In Ravenclaw, intellect and sharp wit become weapons in a constant battle to prove superiority. In Hufflepuff, the struggle is transformed into unity, where equality is the key and rivalry is dissolved into shared strength. But Gryffindor seems curiously free of these tensions. Instead of clashing ambitions, its students rally behind a single, shining figure, whoever that may be at the time. This absence of rivalry may look harmonious on the surface, but beneath it lurks the suggestion of something else, a culture built on the cult of one leader, with the rest of the house cast into supporting roles. The legacy of James Potter illustrates this dynamic. During his years at Hogwarts, James became the embodiment of Gryffindor's spirit, admired for his daring, his Quidditch victories, and his charm. Yet one must ask, did his housemates admire him because of genuine merit, or did they simply accept the role of spectator in the story James wrote for himself? Remus Lupin, Sirius Black, and Peter Pettigrew formed a circle around him, but the rest of the house appeared content to applaud from the sidelines. Even when James crossed into arrogance, hexing Severus Snape for the entertainment of others, his peers seemed to forgive him instantly. Gryffindor was not a place where another rival could rise and challenge James. Instead, it was the stage upon which he reigned. His leadership was not questioned. It was simply accepted. The pattern repeated itself with Harry. The boy who lived arrived at Hogwarts already famous, his name whispered in corridors before he had even stepped into the Great Hall. Gryffindor embraced him as their natural leader, not because he earned authority through competition, but because destiny had written his role in advance. In the Philosopher's Stone, when Harry catches the golden snitch during his first Quidditch match, McGonagall exclaims with pride, "I found you a seeker," and the house celebrates him as though he were already a champion. It was not just victory on the pitch, it was the symbolic crowning of their hero. And from that moment onward, Gryffindor seemed less like a collective of ambitious young witches and wizards, and more like an audience united under their chosen star. Consider the Triwizard Tournament in the Goblet of Fire. When Harry's name is drawn, though he never intended it, the Gryffindors immediately align themselves with him. They wear Support Harry Potter badges and cheer loudly in the stands. No one in his own house considers that perhaps they could seize the moment for themselves, or that another Gryffindor might share in the glory. The concept of rivalry within the house is absent. Even when Ron temporarily doubts Harry's honesty about entering the tournament, the conflict is personal and private, not a contest for house leadership. Once reconciled, the pattern resumes. Harry leads, the house follows. This unquestioned unity is celebrated in the books as loyalty, but beneath it, one might see an unsettling picture. Gryffindor is not a democracy of equals, but a monarchy waiting for its next king. The lack of inner conflict becomes striking when compared with Slytherin. In Slytherin, ambition burns so brightly that every student must fight to carve out their place. Draco Malfoy may strut through the corridors as a prince of Slytherin, but even he faces challenges from within. His companions, Crabbe and Goyle, support him, yet there is always the sense that others in the house could rise, waiting for a misstep. Horace Slughorn's gatherings known as the Slug Club further fuel the competition as students jostle for his favour, each hoping to prove their worth. Slytherin produces leaders not by chance but by conflict. Gryffindor, in contrast, seems to offer leadership as a gift to one chosen figure, while the rest stand aside. Ravenclaw too thrives on inner rivalry, though of a more intellectual kind. Cho Chang and Marietta Edgecombe may not duel for dominance, but the undercurrent of competition exists in the pursuit of knowledge, reputation, and recognition. Luna Lovegood herself admits she is treated as an outsider because she does not conform to Ravenclaw's unspoken hierarchy of intellect. The house is a crucible where every student attempts to shine in their own peculiar way, where recognition is not guaranteed but earned. Again, Gryffindor feels very different. No one in Gryffindor questions Harry's authority over Dumbledore's army, even though students like Neville Longbottom later proved themselves capable of bravery equal to Harry's. Why was Neville not seen as an equal leader? Because Gryffindor's culture does not nurture multiple leaders, it bows to one. Even Hufflepuff, often described as the house of fairness and kindness, demonstrates more variety than Gryffindor. Their loyalty is not passive but active, shown in the way they rallied behind Cedric Diggory. In the Goblet of Fire, Cedric becomes their champion, not by birthright or fate, but because his house recognized his achievements. They celebrated him with genuine pride, even as he competed against Harry. Hufflepuff knew how to support a leader, while still preserving the dignity of the house as a whole. Gryffindor, however, seemed incapable of seeing past Harry. Their unity became dependence. Number 18. Why do their mistakes always turn into victories? Of all the mysteries surrounding Hogwarts, few are as curious as the way Gryffindor House manages to turn mistakes into triumphs. The question becomes unavoidable when we remember how often Harry Potter, Hermione Granger, and Ron Weasley stumbled into danger through recklessness or poor judgment, only for those same missteps to transform into heroic victories. What should have been humiliating punishments or disastrous consequences frequently became legendary exploits. This is not just a quirk of fate. It raises an uncomfortable question about whether Gryffindor enjoyed kind of narrative privilege that other houses did not share. When one examines the story carefully, the evidence piles up in a way that can no longer be dismissed as coincidence. One of the earliest and most striking examples comes from Harry's first year, when his detention in the Forbidden Forest turned into a direct confrontation with Voldemort's shade. He was sent there as punishment for wandering the castle at night, an act that should have earned nothing but disgrace. Instead, Harry stumbled upon the truth of the Dark Lord's lingering presence. What should have been a dark misadventure became the catalyst for Dumbledore to reveal crucial pieces of information. Harry's fear and pain were transformed into courage and insight. For another student, being caught in the forest at night would have been nothing more than a disciplinary mark. For Harry, it became destiny. As Dumbledore later said, "It is our choices, Harry, that show what we truly are, far more than our abilities." But choices are not what placed him in the forest that night. Errors were. Consider also Hermione's famous misstep in her second year, when she brewed Polyjuice Potion in the girls' bathroom. It was an audacious plan, but one fraught with recklessness, secrecy, and illegality. The potion itself backfired on her, leaving her with the features of a cat after accidentally using a hair from Millicent Bulstrode's robe. It should have been nothing more than a humiliating disaster, a cautionary tale about arrogance and carelessness. Yet even that mistake paved the way toward gathering information. About the Chamber of Secrets. Hermione's disobedience of every school rule somehow contributed to Harry's eventual discovery of the basilisk. Once again, what should have been a stain on her reputation became proof of her brilliance. Ron's gambling nature with the enchanted chessboard in their first year is another telling instance. He put himself into reckless danger by insisting on making the sacrificial move, nearly being killed in the process. At its core, it was not rational bravery, but a boy's indulgence in the thrill of playing a deadly game. And yet this reckless choice won them the board and allowed Harry to reach the Philosopher's Stone. Ron's weakness for risk, which should have caused failure, became the very act of heroism remembered for years to come. The pattern begins to reveal itself. Gryffindors seem able to cloak recklessness as valor. Contrast this with Slytherin, where mistakes were rarely forgiven or turned into growth. Draco Malfoy's schemes often collapsed around him, earning him humiliation without redemption. In their second year, his attempt to expose Harry as the heir of Slytherin backfired, when Harry proved himself a skilled seeker and duelist instead. His blunders marked him as foolish rather than brave. In the fifth book, when Draco and his gang tried to ambush Harry in the train compartment, it ended with them hanging from the ceiling, hexed into immobility. Their mistakes never transformed into triumphs. They simply solidified the image of petty cruelty. Even Ravenclaw, the House of Intellect, found its errors punished rather than rewarded. Cho Chang's misplaced trust in Marietta Edgecombe during Dumbledore's army was an error of judgment, one born of desperation and social ties. Instead of leading to a fortunate outcome, it destroyed the secret society and nearly exposed Harry to expulsion. Marietta's betrayal was punished by Hermione's jinx, but it left Cho humiliated and estranged. In Ravenclaw's world, mistakes were not rewritten into legend but remembered as flaws. The pattern continues into Harry's later years. In the Triwizard Tournament, Harry broke rules by receiving illegal help from Hagrid and Mad-Eye Moody, Barty Crouch Jr. in disguise. His lack of preparation and repeated reliance on outside aid should have left him disgraced. Instead, every dangerous encounter, whether surviving the dragon or rescuing 2 captives from the lake, only added to his reputation as a champion. Even when Harry admitted, "I didn't work that out myself," after being told the egg's clue, his failure was forgotten once he triumphed in the task. For other houses, being caught in such dependency would have been shameful. For Gryffindor, it became another step in his rise. Hermione too made errors that became stepping stones to greatness. Her decision in the third year to use the time turner recklessly might have been disastrous. She risked exposure, paradox, and expulsion. Yet rather than punishment, her actions saved Sirius Black and Buckbeak, turning a breach of wizarding law into an act of ultimate justice. When Dumbledore subtly encouraged them, saying, "You must not be seen," it felt almost as if the rules bent around Gryffindor mistakes, making them tools of destiny rather than paths to ruin. The same cannot be said for Hufflepuff. Cedric Diggory's willingness to share the Triwizard Cup with Harry seemed like a noble mistake, trusting too much, believing in fairness. Yet this act of generosity led directly to his death. Cedric's error was not turned into triumph. It became tragedy, proof that in Hogwarts not all houses received the same mercy from fate. Gryffindor's recklessness turned to victory, but Hufflepuff's nobility led to the grave. Even Quidditch games revealed the strange bias of fortune. Harry's constant dives, often reckless and dangerous, resulted in miraculous catches of the snitch. His very first game had him nearly choking on the snitch, a humiliation that should have ended his career. Instead, it became a story of glory. Harry Potter receives the snitch by almost swallowing it. Gryffindor mistakes in sport were retold as feats of daring. By contrast, Slytherin fouls or Ravenclaw blunders were simply remembered as shame. The climax of the series shows the phenomenon most clearly. When Harry marched into the Forbidden Forest to die, it was not through careful planning but through a mixture of desperate instinct and incomplete knowledge. His error in misunderstanding the Hallows, his repeated refusal to fully trust Dumbledore, his reckless determination, all of these should have doomed him. Yet his willingness to face death without full comprehension became the turning point of victory. Voldemort's spell backfired not because Harry was perfect, but because even his mistakes were somehow sanctified. This recurring theme suggests something unsettling. Perhaps Gryffindor embodies a kind of narrative shield. Mistakes that would crush others are reframed as courage. The Sorting Hat itself once warned Harry, "You could be great in Slytherin," and yet the boy's stubborn refusal ensured he joined the house where recklessness could be rewarded. The question becomes not whether Harry was brave, but whether his house guaranteed that bravery would always be remembered as triumph. One wonders what might have happened had Neville Longbottom been in any other house. His forgetfulness and clumsiness were legendary, yet at critical moments, his blunders, such as losing the password to the common room, turned into tests that made him stronger. In the end, his seemingly foolish decision to attack Nagini became the final stroke that defeated Voldemort. The world remembered him not as the bumbling boy who lost his toad, but as the hero who drew the sword of Gryffindor. Once again, an error-prone character was granted legendary status. This phenomenon does not diminish the genuine courage of Gryffindors, but it does raise the suspicion that the narrative of Hogwarts bent in their favor. Mistakes were polished into victories, while other houses carried the burden of failure. Ravenclaw was mocked for arrogance, Hufflepuff was remembered for tragedy, Slytherin was vilified for ambition, but Gryffindor was celebrated for every reckless leap into danger. The question that lingers is whether this was the hand of fate or the invisible bias of a story written to glorify lions above all. When examining the arc of 7 books, one cannot help but feel a tension between fairness and favoritism. Gryffindor errors, Harry's defiance, Hermione's arrogance, Ron's impulsiveness, Neville's clumsiness became chapters of legend. For others, similar faults led to humiliation or destruction. The uncomfortable question remains, did Gryffindor truly earn its victories, or were its mistakes simply rewritten as destiny, while everyone else was left to carry their failures in silence? Number 19. Why do they always have strong allies? Gryffindor has always stood in the very center of the story, and it is impossible not to notice how fate itself seems to bend around this house. From the very first book, when Harry Potter steps into the Sorting Hat's decision, the stage is set for a narrative where Gryffindor never fights alone. When danger comes, allies arrive as if summoned by destiny. The comparison to other houses is stark, even uncomfortable, for it raises a question that the text never answers directly. Why do Gryffindors always receive powerful help at the exact moment they need it? And why does no other house seem to enjoy the same protection? The most obvious example comes during the Battle of Hogwarts in Deathly Hallows. The school unites against Voldemort, but the leaders of the resistance are Gryffindors. Professor McGonagall, the head of Gryffindor, conjures the stone knights from the castle walls themselves, declaring in that firm voice, "Hogwarts is threatened. Man the boundaries, protect us. Do your duty to our school." Even the very stones rise up in their defense. It feels almost like divine intervention. Where is the moment where Ravenclaw Tower animates to defend its own, or when the dungeons of Slytherin come alive for their students? Only Gryffindor seems to be woven into the fabric of the castle's magic in such a direct, dramatic way. Long before the final battle, Dumbledore's constant support of Harry provides another form of alliance. Albus Dumbledore was a Gryffindor himself, and his protection of Harry was more than just that of a headmaster for a student. Again and again, Dumbledore steps in at crucial moments, offering tools, wisdom, and even orchestrated opportunities. In the Philosopher's Stone, it is Dumbledore who gives Harry the invisibility cloak, a relic belonging to James Potter, another Gryffindor. That single gift allows Harry to discover the mirror of Erist, to uncover secrets, and eventually to walk paths no other student could. Would he have ever succeeded in reaching the stone without this intervention? And yet, one must ask, did any Slytherin ever receive an artifact from the headmaster's private possession? Did any Hufflepuff inherit a weapon that would bend the course of the war? The Order of the Phoenix itself embodies this pattern of allies. Nearly every central figure is linked to Gryffindor, Sirius Black, Remus Lupin, James Potter, Lily Potter, Molly and Arthur Weasley, even Alastor Moody. These are the names that fill the roster. The Order presents itself as a coalition of all good wizards, yet the narrative reveals a striking imbalance. Their inner circle is essentially a Gryffindor alumni club. If we imagine an alternate story where the Order is dominated by Ravenclaws or Hufflepuffs, the dynamic shifts entirely. But Rowling never gives us this alternative. Instead, the Gryffindors always find a home filled with allies who will risk their lives for them, reinforcing the sense that Gryffindor courage is never required to stand alone, only to lead with others behind them. Even Harry's encounters with magical creatures carry this pattern of allies. Fawkes, the Phoenix, becomes his personal savior not once, but multiple times. In Chamber of Secrets, Fawkes blinds the basilisk and provides healing tears, ensuring Harry's survival when death seemed inevitable. The scene is unforgettable. The Phoenix flew slowly to Harry, landed on his shoulder, cried into the wound. No Ravenclaw ever receives such miraculous aid from a beast of legend. The closest parallel might be Cho Chang's Eagle Patronus, but that is a charm she produces herself, not a mythical creature intervening to save her life. Once again, the universe seems to bend to Gryffindor's favor, creating an impression that their cause is always sanctified by forces beyond human control. The Gryffindor sword itself is perhaps the clearest symbol of this imbalance. Godric Gryffindor's blade appears when a true Gryffindor is in need. It comes to Harry in the chamber, it comes to Neville in the Battle of Hogwarts. The Sorting Hat delivers it with dramatic timing, as if destiny waits for the exact moment. Only a true Gryffindor could have pulled that out of the hat, Dumbledore explains. But what of the other houses? Where is the relic of Rowena Ravenclaw that appears to her descendants in their darkest hour? Where is the protective talisman of Helga Hufflepuff that chooses loyalty over blood? The system of magical artifacts is uneven, tilted so that Gryffindors are granted a literal weapon that ensures survival, while the others are left with mere legends or cursed heirlooms like Slytherin's locket. The comparison becomes sharper when we examine how other houses are portrayed in similar moments of crisis. Cedric Diggory, the Hufflepuff champion, faces Voldemort in the graveyard. No phoenix appears to save him, no enchanted sword falls into his hands. He dies with the blunt finality of a character unprotected by the system. Ravenclaw students, too, rarely receive outside help. Luna Lovegood, though brave, is abducted and imprisoned in Malfoy Manor with no miraculous rescue until Harry and his Gryffindor allies arrive. The narrative seems to punish these characters for belonging to other houses as though their virtues are not enough to warrant salvation. Slytherin, of course, receives the harshest treatment. When the Battle of Hogwarts begins, Slytherins are herded away, distrusted by default, their chance to show bravery denied. Even Draco Malfoy, who is central to the plot, never once benefits from unexpected allies stepping in at the right moment. He is forced into danger repeatedly, relying on his own cunning, and even then, Harry saves him more than once. The irony is painful. Gryffindors are lifted by allies, while Slytherins are saved by their rivals. The story quietly denies them the chance to be the heroes of their own narrative. It is worth considering whether this favoritism is an intentional reflection of the Sorting Hat's first words to Harry. You could be great, you know, it's all here in your head, and Slytherin will help you on the way to greatness. Yet, Harry insists on Gryffindor, and from that choice flows a cascade of advantages that seem almost supernatural. Had he chosen Slytherin, would the system have abandoned him? Would he still have received allies, or would he have been forced to stand alone against the tide? The books never allow us to see this alternate path, but the implication remains. The universe itself rewards the Gryffindor decision. Another uncomfortable example emerges in Prisoner of Azkaban, when the Patronus stag saves Harry at the lake. It is, of course, Harry's own magic from the future, a temporal loop that ensures his survival. Yet even this strange twist is tinged with Gryffindor legacy, for the stag is the animagus form of his father James. The very identity of the Patronus is a Gryffindor inheritance, a reminder that his house provides not just living allies, but echoes of the dead who step in when needed. No Ravenclaw, no Hufflepuff, no Slytherin enjoys such a hauntingly powerful form of support from their lineage. Consider, too, the resurrection stone scene in Deathly Hallows. When Harry walks into the forest to meet Voldemort, the spirits who join him are his parents, Sirius and Remus, all Gryffindors. They walk with him, surround him, and give him strength. The story could have widened here, offering voices from other houses, perhaps representing the larger wizarding world, but it does not. Once again, the emotional core of the scene is saturated with Gryffindor blood and Gryffindor courage, as if no other house could possibly provide the strength required. The bias becomes almost structural when we remember the Triwizard Tournament. Though designed as a contest of equals, Harry receives aid at every turn. Dobby, a creature allied with him, provides gillyweed. Hermione coaches him, Mad-Eye Moody, disguised as Barty Crouch Jr., guides him, even Hagrid shows him the dragons ahead of time. In contrast, Fleur Delacour, Victor Crumb, and Cedric Diggory are left largely to their own devices. The tournament is tilted not only by the Death Eater's interference, but by the narrative machinery that surrounds Harry, the Gryffindor, with allies who bend rules for his sake. If we interpret the house system as a metaphor for real human virtues, then the pattern grows troubling. Gryffindor represents courage, but courage without hardship loses meaning. When courage is always rewarded by allies, artifacts, and interventions, it becomes less about bravery and more about entitlement. Ravenclaws represent wit, yet they are denied the chance to outwit destiny itself. Hufflepuffs stand for loyalty, but their loyalty often leads to death without recognition. Slytherins embody ambition, but their ambition is stifled by the narrative's suspicion. Only Gryffindor is allowed to shine with both virtue and victory, protected as if by invisible hands. The text itself provides hints of this imbalance, but never acknowledges it outright. Dumbledore says to Harry, "It is our choices, Harry, that show what we truly are, far more than our abilities." And yet, Harry's choice of Gryffindor brings with it a flood of advantages that abilities alone could not account for. The choices of other characters, Cho choosing loyalty to her friends, Cedric choosing fairness, Draco choosing his family's safety, do not earn the same miraculous rewards. Their choices lead them into traps, while Gryffindor's choices open doors. The question then lingers like a shadow behind the brightness of Gryffindor's victories. Is it truly bravery when one is always lifted by allies? Is it truly fairness when one house receives divine artifacts and phoenix tears, while others receive only curses and graves? The uncomfortable answer is that the system, whether designed by Hogwarts itself or by the author's pen, bends toward Gryffindor. Their battles are never fought alone, their victories never entirely their own, and yet they are celebrated as if they were. For readers, this imbalance is worth noticing because it transforms the meaning of courage into something less pure and more privileged, raising the haunting thought that in Hogwarts, as in life, not all houses are given the same chance to survive. Number 20. Why is their friendship seen as the perfect example? The story of Gryffindor's Golden Trio has long been celebrated as the very embodiment of friendship, loyalty, and courage. Yet the closer one reads the pages of J.K. Rowling's saga, the more cracks appear in this shining image. Harry Potter, Hermione Granger, and Ron Weasley are presented to readers as the ultimate companions, inseparable in their triumphs and tragedies. But the truth is far more complicated. Their relationship is not a flawless tapestry of trust and understanding. It is riddled with jealousy, exclusion, and bitter quarrels. The question that must be asked is uncomfortable. Why has their bond been elevated to the pedestal of perfection, when in reality it was often fraught with tension? Consider Ron Weasley's envy, which surfaces repeatedly throughout the books. In Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire, Ron's jealousy explodes into outright hostility after Harry is chosen as a Triwizard champion. Despite years of friendship and witnessing Harry's repeated insistence that he never seeks fame, Ron cannot quell the bitterness within him. Rowling writes, Ron wasn't speaking to Harry, he wasn't speaking to Hermione either. Here, the so-called unbreakable bond is shattered by resentment. Harry, bewildered and hurt, finds himself alone at a time when he most needs support. It is difficult to describe this as the model of loyalty when one of its pillars collapses under the weight of envy. Hermione's place in the trio is equally fraught with unease. Though intelligent, resourceful, and deeply loyal, she often becomes the outsider in her own circle. Her need to follow rules and her fierce academic drive clash with the reckless instincts of her companions. In Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, her early relationship with Harry and Ron is one of exclusion until her knowledge helps them survive the challenge with the troll. Even later, however, she is frequently dismissed or mocked, particularly by Ron. In The Prisoner of Azkaban, when she reports Harry's firebolt to Professor McGonagall, out of concern for his safety, she is ostracized by both boys. Rowling notes with painful clarity, Harry and Ron ostracized Hermione, they weren't speaking to her. This was not a fleeting moment of annoyance, but a prolonged rejection, proving that her place within the trio was never fully secure. Harry himself is no saint in this web of friendship. Time and again he isolates himself, convinced that he alone must bear the weight of prophecy, danger, and responsibility. This tendency reaches its peak in the Order of the Phoenix. Tormented by visions and feeling mistrusted by the adults around him, Harry lashes out even at Ron and Hermione. His outbursts are described vividly. I don't care if I'm being rude. I don't care if I'm being selfish. I'm sick of being kept in the dark. In these moments, he pushes his friends away, ignoring their attempts to share the burden. What kind of model of companionship is it when the leader consistently believes he must stand alone? Yet the myth of the Golden Trio persists, and perhaps it is the dramatic reconciliations that preserve their legendary status. In the fourth book, Ron eventually realizes his error and returns to Harry's side, ashamed of his jealousy. In the third book, Harry and Ron forgive Hermione after her vigilance is proven correct. The cycle of fracture and repair becomes almost ritualistic, as though their conflicts are necessary tests of loyalty. Still, one must ask, is friendship defined by constant breakdowns patched over by forgiveness, or should it be measured by steadiness and mutual respect? Other houses at Hogwarts are rarely granted the same attention when it comes to bonds of friendship, and yet their examples are often stronger, if less celebrated. Take the loyalty among Hufflepuffs. Cedric Diggory, the Hufflepuff champion, demonstrates extraordinary fairness in the Triwizard Tournament by helping Harry solve the riddle of the golden egg. He does not allow rivalry to corrode his sense of honor. His words to Harry, "You take that egg and mull things over. I'll wait," speak volumes about his character. Though they were competitors, Cedric's behavior embodied a friendship rooted in respect, something that Gryffindor's trio frequently struggled to maintain even within their own circle. The Slytherin house, often maligned as incapable of loyalty, also presents overlooked examples. The friendship between Draco Malfoy, Vincent Crabbe, and Gregory Goyle may have been built on dominance and fear, but it is undeniable that Crabbe and Goyle followed Draco with a level of devotion Harry's friends often faltered at. When Harry risked his life against Voldemort, Ron abandoned him more than once, most notably during the hunt for Horcruxes in the Deathly Hallows. Crabbe and Goyle, however, stood with Draco even in the crumbling Room of Requirement, their loyalty persisting until death claimed one of them. Is this not also a form of friendship, albeit shaped in darker soil? Ravenclaws, too, showcase bonds built on respect and shared intellect. Luna Lovegood, often dismissed by her peers as eccentric, becomes one of Harry's truest allies. Her unwavering belief in him during Order of the Phoenix, when few others stood by him, is a testament to her strength as a friend. She tells him, "You're not alone, I'm with you." Unlike Ron's jealousy or Hermione's isolation, Luna's loyalty is simple and unshakable. She demands nothing in return for her support, making her friendship purer in many ways than the complicated trio dynamic. Returning to Gryffindor, one must not ignore the toxic undercurrent of rivalry between Harry and Ron that festers throughout their years together. Ron's insecurities are inflamed by Harry's fame, and Harry, though sympathetic, often fails to reassure him. The Yule Ball is another moment of fracture when Ron lashes out at Hermione, cruelly mocking her for attending with Victor Crumb. Rowling records the venom in his words, "You're fraternizing with the enemy." Hermione's tears that night remind readers that even within the so-called perfect friendship, cruelty was not absent. If we strip away the nostalgia, these moments reveal a bond as flawed as any other. The trio's survival often depended less on their unity and more on circumstances that forced them together. Facing mortal danger tends to bind people, at least temporarily, and the trio was no exception. The challenges of the Philosopher's Stone, the perils of the Chamber of Secrets, the dangers of the Triwizard Tournament, these crises demanded cooperation, but shared danger does not always equal perfect friendship. It can also mask fractures until the danger passes. The very fact that Ron deserted Harry in the Horcrux hunt proves that when the crisis became unbearable, loyalty faltered. Some may argue that these imperfections make the trio more realistic, that their quarrels humanize them. While this is true, the problem lies in presenting them as the ultimate ideal of friendship, while dismissing the bonds of other houses as inferior. By consistently spotlighting Gryffindor, the narrative sidelines the strength of friendships like that of Neville Longbottom and his allies, or even Ginny Weasley's steadfastness. Neville, for instance, stood against Harry, Ron, and Hermione in their first year, proving that his courage included the ability to confront friends. Later, he led Dumbledore's army when the trio was absent, showing loyalty to a cause greater than himself. Moreover, the trio's friendship often reflected a hierarchy rather than equality. Harry, as the chosen one, stood at the center while Ron and Hermione orbited around him. Their lives and choices were frequently subsumed by his destiny. Hermione sacrificed her parents' memories. Ron left his family during times of war. Rarely did Harry step back to prioritize their needs over his mission. Can such an imbalanced relationship be the model of ideal friendship? It is also worth noting how the trio's conflicts mirrored broader themes of betrayal within the series. Just as Peter Pettigrew betrayed James Potter, Ron's desertion echoed this pattern on a smaller scale. The series teaches readers that betrayal lurks even in the closest bonds, but instead of confronting this truth, the narrative redeems the trio by emphasizing reconciliation, glossing over the damage caused. Readers are left with the illusion of perfection rather than the messy, painful reality of human relationships. The idea of Gryffindor as the house of perfect bonds also ignores the loneliness experienced by many of its members. Harry himself often feels isolated, not only from the wizarding world, but even from his friends. His burden as the boy who lived is something neither Ron nor Hermione can fully understand. He dreams of Sirius, longs for his parents, and wrestles with nightmares alone. Despite the presence of his friends, he remains profoundly solitary, which casts doubt on the claim that friendship carried him through his trials. And yet, For all their flaws, the trio's story resonates because of its resilience. They quarrel, betray, and wound each other, yet they return again and again to stand together against darkness. Perhaps this is why their friendship is exalted, not because it was flawless, but because it endured. Still, endurance should not be confused with perfection. Other houses, other students, and other friendships offered quieter, but no less powerful examples of loyalty and love. To dismiss them in favor of Gryffindor's flawed heroes is to overlook the complexity of friendship itself. In the end, the question lingers like a challenge. Why do we continue to hold Gryffindor's golden trio as the ultimate standard of friendship? Was it because the story demanded heroes who embodied courage regardless of their shortcomings? Or was it because readers, like the wizarding world itself, are too quick to believe in myths? Whatever the reason, one truth cannot be denied. Friendship at Hogwarts was never confined to one house, and Gryffindor's trio, for all their glory, were not its only champions. Number 21. Why are they always at the center of history? Of all the mysteries within the wizarding world, none is more unsettling than the dominance of Gryffindor in every defining moment of magical history. Time and again, whenever the tide of events threatened to consume Britain, the heroes who rose to the forefront wore scarlet and gold. It is not merely that Harry Potter himself was a Gryffindor. Even decades before his birth, the narrative of heroism had already been stamped with that crest. Godric's house appears not as one among equals, but as the central axis around which the entire history of magic spins. Yet is this truly the nature of destiny, or is it the selective memory of a society that prefers its heroes to be bold, brash, and Gryffindor-born? Consider the founding mythology of Hogwarts itself. The school was divided into 4 noble houses, each designed to cultivate a different strength. Rowena Ravenclaw valued wit and intellect. Helga Hufflepuff prized loyalty and hard work. Salazar Slytherin demanded cunning and ambition. Godric Gryffindor exalted bravery. Yet when Hogwarts' story is told in books, classrooms, and bedtime tales, it is Gryffindor's virtues that become synonymous with greatness. Even the Sorting Hat, an object imbued with the minds of all 4 founders, sings of courage as though it were the supreme gift. Their daring, nerve, and chivalry set Gryffindors apart, it proclaimed, in Harry's first year. Such phrasing elevates Gryffindor to a pedestal from the very beginning, suggesting that the school itself was designed to worship bravery above all else. The great wars against Voldemort only deepen this impression. Every decisive act seems anchored in Gryffindor. Dumbledore, the greatest wizard of his age, proudly carried the Lion's banner. James and Lily Potter, martyrs whose sacrifice changed the course of history, were both Gryffindors. Sirius Black, Remus Lupin, Minerva McGonagall, the entire pantheon of resistance reads like a Gryffindor roll call. When Harry stepped into the fray, he merely inherited a mantle already gilded with scarlet. The other houses may have fought, but their roles appear secondary, woven into the margins. How many Ravenclaws are remembered for their courage in the final battle? How many Hufflepuffs are celebrated for their quiet resistance? In the telling of events, the spotlight rarely strays from the common room with the roaring fire. Even the relics of power tilt suspiciously toward Gryffindor. The sword of Godric Gryffindor, goblin-forged and gleaming with enchantments, appears at every critical juncture, as though destiny itself bends to the lion's will. When Harry faced the basilisk in the Chamber of Secrets, it was Gryffindor's sword that saved him. When Neville struck the killing blow to Nagini, it was again the same sword. Only a true Gryffindor could have pulled that out of the hat, Dumbledore once told Harry. But this raises a discomforting thought. Why is the power to alter history bound to the emblem of a single house? Ravenclaw's diadem, Hufflepuff's cup, and Slytherin's locket existed only as vessels for corruption. They became Horcruxes tainted by darkness, while Gryffindor's heirloom remained unsullied, a beacon of virtue. Is this coincidence, or does the narrative itself conspire to elevate one house over the rest? The most telling example of imbalance comes with the prophecy. Sybil Trelawney's fateful words declared, "The one with the power to vanquish the Dark Lord approaches, born as the 7th month, dies." That child, chosen by fate, was Harry Potter, a Gryffindor. Yet it might have been Neville Longbottom, also born in July. Fate dangled two threads before the Dark Lord, and Voldemort himself chose the Gryffindor path. Here lies the cruel irony, even when destiny offers another possibility. The story folds itself neatly back into Gryffindor's hands. Neville too was sorted into Gryffindor, ensuring that even the spare, chosen one, could not escape the Crimson Shadow. In both options, the narrative insists on courage as the defining attribute of salvation. Other houses did act, of course. Cho Chang and Luna Lovegood of Ravenclaw fought bravely at the Department of Mysteries. Cedric Diggory, a Hufflepuff, embodied fairness and died an innocent victim in the Triwizard Tournament. Horace Slughorn, a Slytherin, ultimately brought others to fight against Voldemort. Yet when remembered, their contributions shrink into footnotes. Cedric is mourned but serves more as Harry's moral lesson than as a hero in his own right. Luna, beloved though she is portrayed as eccentric rather than central. Slughorn is a survivor, reluctant until guilt drags him forward. Even when other houses contribute, the narrative reframes their actions as supportive of Gryffindor protagonists. The structure of memory itself seems biased. The issue becomes more glaring in the final confrontation. The Battle of Hogwarts could have been the moment to celebrate all four houses as equals. Instead, it turns once more into a Gryffindor epic. Harry's sacrifice mirrors his parents'. Neville, standing tall with Gryffindor's sword, becomes the other champion. Ron and Hermione, Gryffindors both, remain at Harry's side to the last. The defenders of other houses blur into the crowd. The Gryffindors were all standing, and so were the Ravenclaws and Hufflepuffs, the narrative tells us. But the phrasing implies that the bravery of others was surprising, as though courage is an unnatural trait unless painted red and gold. Why this obsession with Gryffindor? Part of the answer lies in Dumbledore himself. His long tenure as headmaster shaped the school's culture, and he never hid his bias toward his own house. He awarded points extravagantly to Gryffindor in Harry's first year, ensuring their victory in the House Cup. He praised Harry even when rules were broken, teaching generations of students that bravery outweighed obedience or fairness. When the most influential wizard in the world continually places Gryffindor on a pedestal, the legend spreads beyond the castle walls. Dumbledore's favoritism rewrote the collective imagination of the wizarding world, framing Gryffindor as the natural home of every savior. There is also a darker reason. Slytherin, Gryffindor's rival, became synonymous with darkness. Voldemort, the most feared dark wizard of the century, bore the green serpent on his robes. His followers, from Bellatrix Lestrange to Lucius Malfoy, were almost all Slytherins. By painting one house as the cradle of evil, society sought an opposite pole, the cradle of good. Gryffindor inherited that role by default. Hufflepuff and Ravenclaw, defined by modesty and intellect, did not provide the dramatic flair necessary for tales of war. The struggle became a binary, Gryffindor against Slytherin, light against shadow. Every story we read is shaped by this duel, until we forget that the other houses were ever present. The uncomfortable truth is that history is not merely what happens, but what is remembered. Wizards tell their children stories of Harry's courage, not of Susan Bones quietly standing her ground. They retell the legend of Gryffindor's sword, not the wisdom hidden in Ravenclaw's diadem before it was corrupted. They chant the names of the marauders, James, Sirius, Remus, all Gryffindors, while erasing the countless unnamed Hufflepuffs who fell in battle. The narrative is selective, polishing the Gryffindor crest until it gleams brighter than any other. As Dumbledore himself once said, It is our choices, Harry, that show what we truly are. Yet when society chooses which stories to pass down, Gryffindor is always at the center. This bias distorts not only the past but the future. Children entering Hogwarts aspire to Gryffindor because all tales of greatness stem from that house. The Sorting Hat itself admits that it considers the student's preference. You might belong in Gryffindor, where dwell the brave at heart. When every child idolizes bravery above all else, the cycle renews itself. More students ask to be sorted into Gryffindor, more heroes emerge from its ranks, and more stories are told that reinforce its supremacy. Thus history becomes a loop, not an honest reflection of diversity, but a self-fulfilling prophecy. To challenge this pattern requires questioning the nature of storytelling. The wizarding world, vast and ancient, has seen countless events that never touched Gryffindor Tower. There were Ravenclaws who discovered spells that shaped society. There were Hufflepuffs who labored quietly in healing wards, saving lives without glory. There were Slytherins who fought against Voldemort in their own subtle ways, though their names are forgotten. Yet because these stories lack the fiery drama of Gryffindor duels, they are seldom told. History, as it is remembered, prefers spectacle, and Gryffindor provides it in abundance. Thus, the uncomfortable question lingers: do Gryffindors truly dominate history, or is history written to make them appear dominant? The record we inherit suggests the latter. From the Sorting Hat songs to the Ministry's memorials, the narrative is crafted to glorify courage while sidelining wit, loyalty, and ambition. The very balance envisioned by the four founders has been lost. Hogwarts was meant to be a place where all strengths were valued, but the legend of Gryffindor eclipses the others, distorting both memory and aspiration. The wizarding world is vast, with thousands of stories left untold. Yet until the narrative dares to break free of Gryffindor's shadow, we will continue to hear only of lions roaring in the night, while the quiet voices of eagles, badgers, and serpents fade into silence. Number 22. Why is their symbol a lion? The lion has long been presented as a universal emblem of courage, strength, and nobility. In the halls of Hogwarts, its golden mane waves proudly above the scarlet banners of Gryffindor, signaling to every student that this is the house of bravery and daring. Yet beneath this radiant symbol lies a more troubling layer. The lion is not merely a figure of courage, it is also the king of beasts, associated with dominance, pride, and an instinct to rule. When we look closer, at Gryffindor's legacy, we must ask whether the lion truly represents only the virtues of courage, or whether it also exposes the dangerous flaws of the house that often go unspoken. Consider Godric Gryffindor himself, the founder who set the standard for his house. We know from Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone that Gryffindor valued courage above all things. But courage is not always a quiet or humble virtue. A lion does not simply defend, it proclaims its authority with a roar that silences all around it. Gryffindor's students, too, often show a need to dominate the narrative of Hogwarts. Harry, Hermione, and Ron repeatedly become the central figures in school-wide conflicts, overshadowing other houses. Their victories are lauded, while the efforts of Hufflepuff or Ravenclaw fade into the background. The lion's roar is not only bravery, but also a demand to be heard above others. The quality of pride is inseparable from the image of the lion, and Gryffindor students frequently embody this pride in ways that verge on arrogance. Sirius Black, one of the most famous Gryffindor alumni, is remembered for his bravery in the fight against Voldemort, but also for his reckless confidence. As a young man, he mocked and humiliated Severus Snape, orchestrating a cruel prank that nearly cost Snape his life when he was lured toward a transformed Remus Lupin. The lion's pride had blinded Sirius to the dangers of his actions. His daring was not noble but destructive, illustrating how Gryffindor courage can slip into hubris when unchecked. Even Harry Potter himself is not immune to this lion-like flaw. In Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix, he frequently clashes with authority, refusing to listen to Dolores Umbridge or even at times to Dumbledore. While Umbridge was a villain in her own right, Harry's impulsive defiance often endangered himself and others. His decision to lead Dumbledore's army is an act of bravery, yes, but also a declaration of leadership that places him above the rest. As Hermione once warned him, "You don't have to go looking for trouble." Yet Harry's lion heart almost always did. In that instinct we see not only courage but also the dangerous need to assert dominance over every challenge, as though retreat or caution were shameful. The choice of the lion as Gryffindor's symbol also raises questions when contrasted with the other houses. Ravenclaw's eagle is not the king of birds, but a creature that soars high, representing wisdom and perspective. Hufflepuff's badger, though small, embodies resilience and loyalty, creatures who defend their own when threatened, but otherwise live quietly. Even Slytherin's serpent, feared though it may be, carries an element of cunning survival rather than sheer dominance. Gryffindor alone chose the lion, the beast that does not share the savannah but rules it. This symbolism implies a hierarchy, a belief that Gryffindors were destined to lead the wizarding world, a notion that matches the way many of its members carry themselves. It is telling that Albus Dumbledore, himself a Gryffindor, was often accused of manipulating events to suit his vision of the future. Though hailed as the wisest of wizards, his choices revealed the lion's hidden trait, the belief that leadership grants the right to make decisions for everyone else. By raising Harry like a pig for slaughter, as Snape bitterly put it, Dumbledore demonstrated both the nobility of sacrifice and the arrogance of assuming such a role without consent. This paternalistic control aligns all too neatly with the lion's dominance in nature, where one powerful leader dictates the fate of the pride. Another dimension of the lion's symbolism is its association with glory and spectacle. Gryffindors often seek recognition, whether consciously or not. Think of Cormac McLaggen, who yearned for the spotlight on the Quidditch field, or James Potter, who flaunted his magical skills before crowds of admiring students. James was undoubtedly brave, willing to defy Voldemort and die for his family, but his youth was marked by arrogance and showmanship. "He was exceedingly arrogant," Snape sneered years later, and even Sirius admitted that James had been an arrogant little Burke. These qualities are not unrelated to courage, but rather the shadow it casts, the need for others to acknowledge one's bravery. The lion's association with dominance also creates tension between Gryffindor and the other houses. Throughout the series, Gryffindors are depicted as the natural rivals of Slytherin, constantly clashing in a battle of ideals. But perhaps this rivalry is not only about good versus evil, as it is often framed. Perhaps it is also about two houses unwilling to yield power. Both lions and serpents are predators, each believing itself destined to rule. The animosity between Harry and Draco Malfoy, or between the Marauders and Snape, reflects this struggle for dominance. In this sense, the lion's symbolism does not merely celebrate courage, but ensures perpetual conflict. Even within Gryffindor, the lion fosters a culture where students feel compelled to live up to the standard of heroism. Neville Longbottom's journey is a striking example. At first, timid and insecure, Neville struggled to see himself as a true Gryffindor. He believed he lacked the courage symbolized by the lion, yet, when the moment of truth arrived, he drew the sword of Gryffindor and slew Nagini, one of Voldemort's final Horcruxes. Dumbledore once said, "It takes a great deal of bravery to stand up to our enemies, but just as much to stand up to our friends." Neville embodied this, but his transformation also illustrates the pressure Gryffindor places on its students to roar like lions, even if their natural disposition is quiet resilience. The lion, as a symbol, also obscures the value of humility. In Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets, Gilderoy Lockhart, a Gryffindor alumnus, presents himself as the quintessential lion, handsome, admired, and seemingly heroic. Yet his bravery is a lie, his true nature revealed as cowardice cloaked in pride. Lockhart's downfall is not accidental. It is the inevitable consequence of a culture that values appearances of courage as much as actual courage. The lion does not whisper, it roars, and in that roar, truth can easily be drowned out by performance. We must also consider the darker side of Gryffindor's legacy, the way in which its students sometimes treat others with contempt. The Marauders, though beloved by many readers, bullied Snape mercilessly. This was not courage but cruelty disguised as playfulness. The lion's pride had made them blind to the dignity of others. Even Hermione, known for her wisdom, at times embodied the Gryffindor flaw of moral superiority, lecturing those around her as though only she had the right answers. The lion may represent bravery, but it also suggests a house that believes in its own moral authority to the point of dismissing others. The tension between courage and arrogance becomes most vivid in moments of crisis. When Harry and his friends chose to break into the Ministry of Magic, or later, Gringotts Bank, their actions were undeniably heroic. Yet they were also reckless, endangering lives and relying on extraordinary luck to escape. The lion's instinct is to charge, to confront danger head-on, but sometimes wisdom lies in restraint. Gryffindor's symbol does not honor patience, humility, or diplomacy, qualities that could have prevented many of the catastrophes the trio faced. Even the Sorting Hat itself hints at this complexity. In its first song, it describes Gryffindor as favoring those with daring, nerve, and chivalry. But in Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix, the hat warns that the houses are too divided, each too proud of its own values. Gryffindor's pride in its lion symbol is part of this division. The very traits that make Gryffindor's heroes also make them stubborn, competitive, and sometimes blind to the wisdom of others. The lion, king of beasts, refuses to step down from its throne, even when cooperation would serve the greater good. The lion as a symbol, then, reveals the duality of Gryffindor House. On one hand, it inspires bravery, sacrifice, and the willingness to confront evil at great personal cost. On the other, it exposes a shadow of arrogance, a hunger for glory, and an instinct to dominate. Perhaps Godric Gryffindor chose the lion not only to celebrate the virtues of his students, but also to warn them of their weaknesses. For every roar of triumph, there is the danger of pride. For every act of courage, the temptation of arrogance. And so the lion stands golden and proud, both a beacon of nobility and a mirror of Gryffindor's most inconvenient truths. Number 23. Why do they always have their own heroes? Of all the houses in Hogwarts, Gryffindor has always been painted in gold. Its colours shine brightest in the tales of bravery, and the names most often repeated in corridors of memory belong to lions. Harry Potter, Albus Dumbledore, Minerva McGonagall, James Potter, Lily Evans. The wizarding world speaks of them as if courage itself had chosen this one tower to dwell in, leaving others only shadows. When the history of Hogwarts is written, Gryffindor becomes not just one house among four, but the chosen face of the school, the emblem of glory. Yet hidden beneath this admiration lies a quiet question. Why does Gryffindor always seem to have its own heroes, while the achievements of Ravenclaw, Hufflepuff, and Slytherin are folded away like forgotten parchments? The legend of Harry Potter himself solidified the house's mythic status. The boy who lived, a name etched in wizarding history, carried the Gryffindor banner from the first book to the last. From slaying a basilisk with the sword of Gryffindor to standing firm in the forbidden forest before Voldemort, Harry's story is not just personal triumph, but a tale stamped with house identity. J.K. Rowling herself writes, "There's not a single witch or wizard who went bad who wasn't in Slytherin." In contrast, Gryffindor is depicted as pure, loyal, and brave, its members seemingly destined to be the champions of light. When children read this, they come to believe Gryffindor is the natural home of virtue, while other houses are at best clever or kind, but never the chosen heroes. Consider how the school celebrates victories. The The Triwizard Tournament, a contest designed to honor magical skill, cunning, and intelligence, became in the fourth book another stage for Gryffindor's spotlight. Harry was not meant to enter, yet once his name appeared, the narrative transformed the event into a Gryffindor crusade. Cedric Diggory, the Hufflepuff champion, showed immense fairness and bravery. He warned Harry about the dragons, shared crucial hints, and even offered to take the cup together. But when the dust of tragedy settled, Cedric became the side note and Harry the martyr. The narrative quickly shifted from Hufflepuff's moment of recognition to Gryffindor's eternal saga of sacrifice. The school's institutional memory seems complicit in this imbalance. Look at the great figures painted in the magical portraits that hang in the castle. Dumbledore's wisdom is omnipresent, his image a lighthouse guiding students even after death. Professor McGonagall's strict but loving leadership becomes synonymous with Hogwarts itself. Even the Marauders, James Potter, Sirius Black, and Remus Lupin, are romanticized despite their reckless youth. The legacy of Ravenclaws, like Phileas Flitwick, who fought bravely at the Battle of Hogwarts, remains muted in comparison. The quiet genius of Luna Lovegood, whose unique vision repeatedly helped Harry and his friends, is remembered more as eccentric charm than heroic strength. One could argue Gryffindor benefits from narrative framing. Rowling constructs her saga through Harry's eyes, and Harry lives in Gryffindor. Thus, the house becomes not merely a dormitory, but the emotional center of the epic. The fat lady guarding the portrait hole becomes a symbol of safety, the common room a nest of warmth. By contrast, the Ravenclaw Tower is glimpsed only once, described through riddles, and Hufflepuff's quarters remain a mystery, until Pottermore years later. How can readers admire what they never see? The imbalance is not only about deeds, but about visibility. Gryffindor receives a stage, others wait in the wings. Slytherin complicates the picture. It does not lack for powerful names: Severus Snape, Tom Riddle, Horace Slughorn. Yet their stories are stained with darkness. Snape alone breaks the pattern, revealed in the end as the secret guardian of Harry's life. His love for Lily Potter, a Gryffindor, becomes the emotional keystone of his character. Even here, Gryffindor identity bleeds into the redemption of another house. The legacy of Slytherin is defined in opposition to Gryffindor, its heroes measured by how much they serve Gryffindor's story. The contrast is stark. Slytherin births villains, Ravenclaw breeds eccentrics, Hufflepuff grows loyal companions, but Gryffindor alone shapes legends. This imbalance extends to how Hogwarts honors its dead. The Great Hall during the Battle of Hogwarts is filled with grief, but attention circles back to the Gryffindor narrative. Fred Weasley's death is carved into the collective memory, a Gryffindor twin silenced. Yet Colin Creevey, a brave Muggle-born boy who snuck back to fight though underage, lies unremembered by many readers. He was Gryffindor too, yet his anonymity shows how the house's myth selects even within its own. Still, the structure remains. To die in Gryffindor is to be part of the school's golden tragedy, while other houses' sacrifices dissolve into background sorrow. The Sorting Hat itself contributes to the myth. In Philosopher's Stone it sings, "You might belong in Gryffindor, where dwell the brave at heart." This sets courage as the highest virtue, overshadowing wit, loyalty, and ambition. Bravery becomes synonymous with greatness, and thus Gryffindor claims the crown by definition. Readers rarely recall the later Hat's warning that division between houses weakens the school. Instead, the message most internalized is that bravery conquers all. This becomes self-fulfilling. Gryffindors are always the protagonists, and the protagonists are always remembered as heroes. What if history had been told through a different eye? Imagine Hogwarts as seen by a Ravenclaw like Cho Chang or a Hufflepuff like Susan Bones. Cho, who lost Cedric, might tell a story not of Gryffindor's endless courage, but of Hufflepuff's silenced grief. Susan, whose entire family was targeted by Voldemort, might recount loyalty and resilience as equal virtues to daring. Yet these voices remain faint. The story we received canonized Gryffindor as the sole crucible of heroism, and in doing so, left us with an incomplete picture of the school's soul. Even in the everyday life of Hogwarts, Gryffindor's dominance is evident. Quidditch matches, though technically between houses, often serve as showcases for Harry's talent. In Prisoner of Azkaban, when Gryffindor finally wins the Quidditch Cup, it is described with unmatched exultation. Harry had won the Quidditch Cup for Gryffindor, the best moment of his life. Did Ravenclaw or Slytherin victories ever receive such narrative glory? Never. The pitch itself seems enchanted to roar louder for lions. This framing teaches readers that Gryffindor victories matter more, even when other teams play just as skillfully. The weight of prophecy also tilts toward Gryffindor. The Chosen One was destined to be born as the 7th month dies, and though Neville Longbottom fit the description, the Dark Lord's choice confirmed Harry. Both were Gryffindors. Neville's journey from timid boy to the Slayer of Nagini is a testament to courage flowering late, yet it still fits neatly into the Gryffindor myth. The prophecy might have chosen otherwise, perhaps a Ravenclaw child with knowledge as weapon, but fate and narrative aligned again to secure Gryffindor's crown. When destiny itself becomes a Gryffindor tale, what hope remains for others to shine? This hero-making machinery can feel like propaganda. Gryffindor's victories are retold, their losses sanctified, their members mythologized. Ravenclaw's intellectual triumphs vanish into dusty tomes, Hufflepuff's kindness is mistaken for mediocrity, and Slytherin's ambition is corrupted into villainy. Even when the Sorting Hat calls for unity, the story insists on division, with Gryffindor elevated as the true heart. It is as if Hogwarts runs its own public relations office, ensuring lions are always on the cover page of history. There is, however, resistance in the margins. Luna Lovegood, a Ravenclaw, proves essential in guiding Harry to Ravenclaw's lost diadem. She is the one who keeps hope alive when Harry despairs. Flitwick, small but fierce, defends the castle with spells of extraordinary brilliance. Sprout, the Hufflepuff head, arms students with Devil's Snare, and mandrakes to fight Death Eaters. Even Slughorn, despite his flaws, rallies his Slytherins in the final hour. These acts, when considered together, reveal a truth the Gryffindor myth obscures. Hogwarts was saved not by one house, but by all. Yet the narrative glow does not fade. Children who read the series dream not of becoming sharp Ravenclaws or steadfast Hufflepuffs, but of being sorted beneath scarlet and gold. Merchandise, fan culture, and even official media reinforce this bias. Gryffindor scarves outsell all others, and the universal cry remains, 10 points for Gryffindor. In this sense, Gryffindor has won not just within the books, but in the world beyond them, a triumph of storytelling as much as of courage. And so the uncomfortable question lingers. Is Gryffindor truly braver, greater, or simply louder in the tale told about Hogwarts? For every Harry Potter there was a Cedric Diggory, for every Dumbledore a Flitwick, for every McGonagall a Sprout. Yet memory favours the lion, and the others become whispers. Perhaps the real enchantment of Gryffindor is not its courage, but its myth-making, the subtle spell of narrative that crowns it eternal champion, while the rest of Hogwarts remains forever in its shadow. Number 24. Why do they always get the most cinematic victories? Of all the houses at Hogwarts, Gryffindor is the one whose victories carry the sheen of legend, as though the very walls of the castle were compelled to sing their triumphs. When Harry faced Quirrell in the depths beneath the trapdoor, the scene was steeped in firelight and mortal peril, the kind of climax that engraves itself on memory. Yet one must ask, was this purely because of Harry's bravery, or because Gryffindor had been cast as the school's hero house, destined to shine in spectacle? Ravenclaw students earn their victories in the library's shadows, deciphering mysteries no one else could, but their triumphs do not echo through the Great Hall. Slytherins orchestrate elaborate maneuvers, subtle and precise, and still their successes never arrive wrapped in fanfare. Gryffindor's victories, on the other hand, arrive with explosions of colour and thunder, leaving audiences breathless. The Triwizard Tournament offers one of the most telling illustrations. Harry was entered against his will, a pawn in a scheme designed by Barty Crouch Jr. to deliver him to Voldemort. Yet, despite the manipulation, the narrative crowned Harry with glory. He fought dragons, dove into the depths of the lake to save not only Ron but Fleur's sister, and duelled Voldemort himself before escaping. His return with Cedric's body was described in tragic grandeur. A mixture of grief and anger was surging through him like never before. The moment was cinematic, overwhelming in its tragedy, and Gryffindor once again stood as the beacon of drama. Compare this with Cedric Diggory, a Hufflepuff, who performed every task with grace, fairness and talent, but his achievements were eclipsed the moment he stood beside Harry. Gryffindor's stage swallowed him whole. The Quidditch matches are another example where Gryffindor is afforded spectacle. Every victory is a roar of fire and thunder, narrated with intensity. In Harry's first match, the description lingered on the sheer glory of his dive. With a jolt of excitement, Harry pulled his broom upward, the snitch trapped in his hand, the crowd erupting with cheers. Even when he was fouled or nearly killed, the crowd's reaction elevated Gryffindor's wins into a celebration of heroism. Yet when Hufflepuff or Slytherin triumphed, the books rarely afforded such rich detail. Gryffindor's victories always carried a heroic crescendo, while others were recorded with the brevity of a footnote. The stories seemed unable to resist handing Gryffindor a spotlight. Consider the Chamber of Secrets. The discovery of the monster, the descent into the basilisk's lair, the confrontation with Tom Riddle, all unfolded like an epic carved from stone. Harry, armed only with Godric Gryffindor's sword, slew a creature that had petrified students for months. The narrative glowed with heroic imagery. The phoenix's song rising in the chamber, the sword glittering in Harry's hand. But how different might the story have been if a Ravenclaw student had pieced together the diary's secret, or if a Slytherin had outmaneuvered the threat through cunning. Their contributions might have been dismissed as clever tricks rather than immortalized as grand sacrifice. The lion's roar was chosen to drown out all other voices. Slytherin's victories, though quieter, often showed brilliance in strategy. Think of Draco Malfoy's clever use of the inquisitorial squad in Order of the Phoenix, maneuvering with authority while others resisted blindly. Or consider how Horace Slughorn preserved himself and others during Voldemort's rise, hiding his true loyalties until the right moment. These acts required intelligence and calculation, yet history did not turn them into ballads. Gryffindor, by contrast, was painted in broad strokes of courage. Even when Harry acted rashly, his recklessness was described as valor. The narrative tilted the scales. One cannot ignore Dumbledore's influence in this bias. His speeches often highlighted Gryffindor achievements, transforming them into moral lessons. At the end of the first year, after the Philosopher's Stone was saved, he awarded points not only to Harry, Ron, and Hermione, but also to Neville, who stood up to his friends. His words carried the weight of history. It takes a great deal of bravery to stand up to our enemies, but just as much to stand up to our friends. The phrasing turned a moment of quiet resistance into a legend, placing Gryffindor at the heart of the school's mythology. Ravenclaws, with their countless intellectual victories, received no such immortal lines. Even in defeat, Gryffindor's losses were framed dramatically, as though preparing for the next act of triumph. When Harry fell from his broom during a Quidditch match against Hufflepuff in Prisoner of Azkaban, the Dementors swarming the field, the scene was painted as tragedy, a hero struck down. The loss became less about Gryffindor's failure and more about the forces of darkness opposing their courage. Meanwhile, Hufflepuff's deserved victory vanished into obscurity as if unworthy of the same storytelling canvas. Victories were not equal, they were curated. The Battle of the Department of Mysteries was one more Gryffindor-laden spectacle. The group that charged into danger consisted primarily of Gryffindors: Harry, Ron, Hermione, Neville, and Ginny, while Luna Lovegood, a Ravenclaw, remained almost incidental in the retelling. The imagery of shattering prophecies, crashing shelves, and blazing wands was tied to Gryffindor bravery. Neville, though underestimated for years, emerged in that moment as a true lion, standing bloodied and broken, yet unyielding. His declaration, "Dumbledore's army," rang like a battle cry. Once again, Gryffindor's triumphs were not subtle. They were painted across the sky in fire. It is also worth questioning whether Gryffindor's cinematic victories served a narrative function, aligning the reader with a house cast as the school's protagonist. If the story had dwelled equally on Ravenclaw's victories in intellectual pursuits or Hufflepuff's endurance and loyalty, the balance might have shifted. Yet the story demanded a stage where courage triumphed over calculation, where rash decisions carried the air of destiny. Gryffindor was not merely a house, it was the lens through which Hogwarts was meant to be seen. The question is whether this lens warped the truth. Even minor events reinforce the pattern. When Ron won the game of wizard's chess in Philosopher's Stone, his sacrifice was elevated into drama. That's chess. He's going to sacrifice himself? Hermione's intellect was necessary to solve the potions riddle, but the narrative granted Ron's moment the cinematic edge of self-sacrifice, overshadowing her quieter victory. Gryffindor moments were framed with emotional resonance, while Ravenclaw achievements remained largely intellectual footnotes. The story seemed determined to shape a hero's journey out of Gryffindor's every step. The Goblet of Fire's final confrontation made this bias even clearer. When Harry and Voldemort's wands connected, the golden thread of light, the priori incantatem, bound them in a spectacle that stunned the audience. The spirits of Harry's parents and Cedric emerged, cloaked in ethereal light, guiding him to victory. The moment was soaked in myth, an image of Gryffindor's courage defying death itself. Yet the quiet resourcefulness that often belonged to Ravenclaws or the cunning maneuvering that characterized Slytherins would never have been staged with such grandeur. Gryffindor's stage was always illuminated. There is also the matter of narrative framing. Gryffindor's members were granted the most vivid lines, the most quotable declarations of defiance. Sirius Black's words in Prisoner of Azkaban, "You should have died, rather than betray your friends as we would have done for you," resonate with the archetype of Gryffindor loyalty. Compare this to Cho Chang's grief in Order of the Phoenix, which was treated as messy, awkward, even irritating to Harry. Her Ravenclaw sorrow was dismissed, while Gryffindor anguish was elevated to noble suffering. The narrative chose which emotions deserved grandeur. The final battle at Hogwarts cemented the pattern. The duel between Harry and Voldemort was staged in the Great Hall, witnessed by the entire school, a moment of pure cinematic climax. Harry's words, "Try for some remorse, Riddle," framed him as both moral victor and hero of the age. The description lingered on the drama of their wands clashing, Voldemort's death unraveling in silence before the cheers erupted. Yet many had fought and won smaller, quieter victories in the battle, Professor McGonagall holding the line, or Luna guiding her friends with clarity. Those triumphs, though crucial, were described without grandeur. The camera, so to speak, never left Gryffindor. One must finally consider whether this favoritism reveals the deepest truth about Hogwarts itself. Perhaps Gryffindor was designed, from the very beginning, to stand as the house of narrative spectacle, the main character of the school. Godric's lion, roaring at the center of history, would always draw more attention than the silent wit of Rowena's eagle or the patient loyalty of Helga's badger. The pattern is undeniable. Every Gryffindor victory arrives wrapped in thunder and light, immortalized as if the world itself paused to watch. And so the uncomfortable question lingers: was Gryffindor truly braver, or merely the chosen stage for a story that demanded heroes bathed in flame. Number 25. Why are their mistakes barely punished? The story of Hogwarts is filled with acts of bravery, betrayal, loyalty, and punishment, yet one uncomfortable question lingers when we examine the school's disciplinary record. The Gryffindor house, known for its courage and recklessness, seems to live under a strange protective shield. While Slytherins, Ravenclaws, and Hufflepuffs often face swift retribution for their mistakes, Gryffindors are regularly spared the full consequences of their actions. This uneven treatment raises doubts about the fairness of the system and exposes favoritism in a school meant to embody justice and equality. At the heart of this discussion lies the troubling reality that Harry Potter and his friends repeatedly broke rules, yet managed to avoid punishments that others could not escape. One of the earliest examples comes from Harry's very first year. When Draco Malfoy challenged him to a midnight duel, Harry, Ron, Hermione, and Neville ended up wandering the corridors after curfew. The punishment should have been severe. Professor McGonagall indeed scolded them harshly, and they lost 50 points each, but the irony lies in what followed. During their detention in the Forbidden Forest, Harry discovered Voldemort drinking unicorn blood, an event that directly advanced the main plot. Instead of being remembered as reckless children who disobeyed the rules, they were framed as heroes who stumbled into destiny. The narrative itself reshaped their punishment into an opportunity, something that rarely happened when Slytherins misbehaved. Draco Malfoy, for example, who also joined that detention, was painted as cowardly and selfish, his failure magnified rather than forgiven. Professor McGonagall's role is particularly revealing. She was strict, intelligent, and famously fair, yet her treatment of her own house was often tinged with leniency. In Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone, when she caught Harry flying on a broomstick to retrieve Neville's Remembrall, her reaction should have been immediate expulsion from the team or a heavy penalty. Instead, she astonishingly recommended him to Oliver Wood for the Quidditch team, saying, "Your father would have been proud." What could have been considered blatant disregard for school rules became a celebrated moment that forever defined Harry as a Quidditch star. No Slytherin student could have expected such a reversal of fate from breaking the rules so openly. The favoritism was not confined to Harry. Ron Weasley enjoyed similar indulgences. His reckless use of the flying car in Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets put both him and Harry in grave danger, not to mention the risk to the Muggles who saw the enchanted vehicle. They crashed into the Whomping Willow and caused chaos at the school entrance. Professor Snape, unsurprisingly, demanded expulsion. Yet instead of being expelled or even suspended, they were allowed to stay after Dumbledore's light words of warning. Ron's punishment amounted to a howler from his mother and some scolding from teachers. Compare this to the way Snape treated Slytherins who made mistakes. He deducted house points mercilessly for even minor infractions. The difference in standards was blatant, and Ron's crime was practically brushed aside in the name of narrative excitement. Hermione Granger's case is more subtle but still significant. She broke countless school rules in her pursuit of knowledge, sneaking into the restricted section of the library with Harry and using spells she should never have attempted. In Prisoner of Azkaban, she even used a time turner to attend multiple classes at once, a dangerous magical device strictly controlled by the Ministry. When this was revealed, rather than punishing her for bending the rules of time itself, Dumbledore and McGonagall praised her responsibility. Yet the same book showed how harshly other students were treated for far smaller mistakes. When Draco Malfoy faked an injury to avoid a class, he was not punished but constantly ridiculed, while Hermione's manipulation of time, far more dangerous, was forgiven without hesitation. Perhaps the most striking case lies in Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire, when Harry's name emerged from the goblet despite the rule that only students above 17 could compete. Although Harry insisted he had not submitted his name, suspicion naturally fell on him. Instead of facing sanctions for being caught up in the scheme, he was excused and allowed to compete. The rules of the Triwizard Tournament were said to be binding, but the entire school atmosphere turned against him in whispers, not in formal punishment. A Slytherin in the same position would almost certainly have been accused of cheating, and punishment would have been inevitable. Harry, however, received sympathy and the reluctant acceptance of authority figures, reinforcing the idea that Gryffindors lived under a shield of tolerance. The Quidditch matches also demonstrate this imbalance. Gryffindor fouls were often dismissed or forgiven, while Slytherin fouls were highlighted and condemned. In Chamber of Secrets, Draco Malfoy became the Slytherin Seeker, using his father's money to buy Nimbus 2001 brooms, a clear example of privilege. Yet when Gryffindor fouled during games, such as when Fred and George Weasley tackled Slytherin players, Madam Hooch often overlooked it or issued minimal consequences. The underlying message was that Gryffindors fought for honor, while Slytherins fought unfairly. Punishments were shaped not by the rules, but by the narrative of morality that the teachers seemed to uphold. In Order of the Phoenix, the unfairness reached new heights. When Harry formed Dumbledore's army, he gathered students secretly to train in defense against the dark arts, a direct violation of school rules under Dolores Umbridge's regime. While one could argue that Umbridge herself represented tyranny and deserved defiance, the fact remains. Harry's actions would have been grounds for expulsion under normal circumstances. Instead, he was portrayed as the leader of a noble rebellion. Compare this to Marietta Edgecombe, the Ravenclaw who betrayed the group. Her punishment was not merely administrative. Hermione cursed her with permanent scars spelling sneak across her face. The school did this cruel punishment, while Harry's defiance was glorified. Gryffindors were positioned as martyrs, while others were branded as traitors. The defense often given for Gryffindor leniency is that their intentions were noble. Harry, Ron, and Hermione broke rules not for selfish reasons, but to protect others or uncover truths. Yet this argument does not erase the fact that consequences were applied unevenly. In Prisoner of Azkaban, Harry sneaked into Hogsmeade without permission multiple times using the Marauder's map. Each time he risked capture, and though caught once by Snape, he escaped punishment. His excuse was always that he sought information to help protect his friends. But imagine a Slytherin sneaking off with a secret map of the school's hidden passages. Would they not face immediate confiscation, detention, and point loss? The justification of noble intent cannot explain why the rules bent so easily for Gryffindor. Professor Dumbledore himself shaped much of this imbalance. His favoritism was never overt, yet his decisions revealed a soft spot for Harry and his house. In Sorcerer's Stone, the awarding of last-minute house points at the end-of-year feast changed the entire outcome of the House Cup. Gryffindor, originally far behind, won because of points given to Harry, Ron, Hermione, and Neville for bravery. While bravery is indeed commendable, the timing of the announcement undermined the fairness of the system. Slytherin had celebrated their victory only to have it snatched away publicly in a humiliating reversal. The students of other houses saw this as proof that Gryffindor always had the headmaster's hand, tipping the scales in their favor. Even Severus Snape, notorious for his bias towards Slytherin, found himself powerless against Gryffindor's shield. In Half-Blood Prince, when Harry used the Sectum Sempra curse on Draco Malfoy, causing life-threatening injuries, Snape demanded punishment. Instead of severe expulsion or wand confiscation, Harry's penalty was detention with Snape. The incident was brushed aside as though it were merely a mistake in judgment. The gravity of Harry using a dark, dangerous curse should have been treated as an expellable offense. Yet the boy was allowed to continue with his studies, and his Quidditch matches interrupted only temporarily. The consequences never matched the danger of his actions. This pattern extended to the Weasley twins, Fred and George. Their constant pranks, which often disrupted classes and endangered students, were tolerated because of their charm and humor. In Order of the Phoenix, they released a swamp inside the school as a protest against Umbridge's authority. Instead of permanent punishment, Their rebellion was celebrated by students and even half acknowledged by Dumbledore's supporters. If Slytherins had filled corridors with dangerous magical objects, they would have faced suspension. For Gryffindors, it was framed as a moment of defiance against tyranny. The favoritism was not invisible to the students. Draco Malfoy constantly pointed it out, accusing teachers of letting Harry escape justice. His bitterness had a foundation in truth. Even neutral students like Cho Chang noticed the strange immunity Gryffindors seemed to enjoy. The imbalance created divisions within the school, fueling resentment and reinforcing the stereotype that Gryffindors were heroes while others were obstacles or villains. This unequal treatment undermined the very idea of Hogwarts as a place where fairness was meant to guide young witches and wizards. When we examine these cases collectively, the conclusion becomes unavoidable. Gryffindors, especially those closest to Harry Potter, were shielded from consequences that would have destroyed the reputations and futures of others. Their mistakes were reframed as acts of courage, their violations of rules rebranded as necessary steps toward victory. Hogwarts teachers, intentionally or not, created an environment where the lion's house roared freely, while the snake, the eagle, and the badger remained caged by punishment. The uncomfortable truth is that Gryffindor's legacy of bravery was built not only on courage but on a pattern of overlooked misdeeds. Number 26. Why do they feud only with Slytherin and not others? Gryffindor's story in the Harry Potter books is always framed against Slytherin, as though Hogwarts itself exists on a stage with only 2 lead actors and 2 supporting roles. From the moment Harry is sorted, the sorting hat whispers that Slytherin could make him great, yet warns him of the darkness there. Gryffindor becomes the chosen alternative, and that initial moment sets the tone for the entire series. But what is striking is that this enmity is not simply rivalry, it is sustained hostility. One rarely reads of Gryffindor locking horns with Ravenclaw or Hufflepuff, and the question arises whether this was a natural development of school competition or a narrative construction that demanded Gryffindor always stand in opposition to an enemy designed to mirror them. The hostility is planted in the first book, when Draco Malfoy offers his hand to Harry, and upon rejection declares that Gryffindors are not worth his friendship. The sorting hat itself cements the rivalry by placing Malfoy in Slytherin, while Harry goes to Gryffindor. This neat division of the boy hero and the boy antagonist ensures that the narrative of good versus bad is tied not only to individuals, but to entire houses. Yet, curiously, Ravenclaw and Hufflepuff fade into the background of these disputes. Gryffindor does not argue over Quidditch with them to the same fiery degree, nor do they form deep antagonisms in class. The battlefield of Hogwarts seems designed to be a 2-house conflict, and one must ask why this division was simplified to that degree. Ravenclaw, for instance, houses students like Cho Chang and Luna Lovegood. Cho becomes important to Harry in the Order of the Phoenix, yet the tensions between her and Harry are not linked to her house but to grief, misunderstandings and betrayal within Dumbledore's army. Gryffindor never despises Ravenclaw as a group. Instead, individual Ravenclaws appear almost neutral or eccentric observers. Even when Luna is mocked, she is mocked by her own peers rather than by Gryffindors. The absence of a collective clash suggests that Rowling chose to leave Ravenclaw out of major house conflicts, keeping the moral battlefield centered on the Gryffindor-Slytherin divide. Hufflepuff, on the other hand, is defined by its loyalty and hard work. Cedric Diggory becomes a rival in the Triwizard Tournament, yet even here the rivalry is clean and noble, not poisoned by malice. Harry feels genuine grief when Cedric is murdered, and Dumbledore later praises him as a boy who exemplified many of the qualities we most admire: bravery, loyalty, and fairness. The Hufflepuff-Gryffindor dynamic is therefore one of mutual respect rather than antagonism. When conflict does arise, such as some Hufflepuffs believing Harry cheated his way into the tournament, it dissipates into the background, never evolving into entrenched hostility. The Gryffindor-Slytherin enmity, however, is systemic. Quidditch Matches between the two are described with unusual aggression. In Chamber of Secrets, the rivalry erupts when Draco Malfoy becomes the Slytherin Seeker, leading to accusations that Lucius Malfoy bought his son's position with Nimbus 2001 brooms. Gryffindor's sneer, Slytherin's jeer, and what might be normal school competition becomes a full-blown feud. When Hermione insults Draco by calling him a foul, loathsome, evil little cockroach, it is not merely personal, it resonates with the entire culture of animosity between the houses. The story positions Gryffindor and Slytherin not simply as rivals, but as eternal opposites, embodiments of moral archetypes. One reason for this binary may be structural. The narrative of the series required Harry to have a clear other, a reflection of what he could have been. The Sorting Hat makes it clear that Harry has qualities suitable for Slytherin, particularly ambition and resourcefulness, but his refusal of that path sets up a permanent dichotomy. Gryffindor is therefore not only Harry's home, but also his moral stance against the alternative identity that could have been his. The enemy is personalized in Draco, institutionalized in the House of Slytherin, and finally magnified in Voldemort, who himself was a Slytherin. Thus, the feud between houses is not just about school spirit, it is about identity, destiny, and the path of good versus evil. Yet such stark moral division feels artificial in a school setting. Realistically, one would expect rivalries across all houses, shaped by sports, academics, and teenage cliques. Why do Gryffindors not resent Ravenclaws for their intellectual superiority, or clash more frequently with Hufflepuffs over Quidditch? The simplification of Hogwarts politics may reflect the author's intent to build a story accessible to younger readers, a narrative where the heroes and villains are easily recognized. Still, this choice creates discomfort. It reduces the complexity of inter-house dynamics into a single rivalry that dominates the entire school experience. The faculty at Hogwarts reinforce this divide. Severus Snape favors Slytherins shamelessly, docking points from Gryffindors for the slightest offense while rewarding his own house excessively. In Sorcerer's Stone, he deducts points from Harry and Ron for imagined misdemeanors while ignoring Slytherin misbehavior. Meanwhile, Professor McGonagall fiercely supports Gryffindor, sometimes bending rules in their favor. This institutional bias inflames tensions, ensuring that every small incident grows into a battle of house pride. Teachers who should moderate competition instead deepen the trench between the two houses, leaving little room for other rivalries to take root. Consider also the ghostly representatives of each house. Nearly Headless Nick and the Bloody Baron are symbolic foils, one jovial and tragically comic, the other grim and menacing. Their presence at feasts reinforces the idea of houses as mythic entities. Ravenclaw's Grey Lady and Hufflepuff's Fat Friar lack the same narrative intensity, and thus the conflicts attached to their houses remain dim. Gryffindor and Slytherin are dramatized not just in living students, but in the very lore of Hogwarts' spectral traditions. It is as though the school was designed to keep alive a centuries-old feud while quietly sidelining the others. This opposition culminates in the Battle of Hogwarts. When Voldemort demands Harry, it is Slytherin students who are suspected of betrayal, while Gryffindors stand firm. Rowling allows individuals like Slughorn to break the stereotype, but the overall image is clear. Slytherin represents cowardice or treachery, while Gryffindor embodies defiance and sacrifice. This final confrontation makes visible the narrative scaffolding of the series. Hogwarts is a stage for one central duel, and the other houses are merely spectators or supporting cast. From a literary perspective, one might argue that this construction weakens the realism of the world. A boarding school with 4 houses should have layered dynamics, shifting alliances and rivalries beyond a single axis. But Hogwarts, for all its magical complexity, operates in a moral binary. It is the same simplicity found in fairy tales, where wolves are always bad and heroes always brave. Gryffindor and Slytherin become archetypes rather than student bodies, and this archetypal clash gives readers an easy lens to interpret the saga. Yet it leaves us with the uncomfortable question, what was sacrificed in terms of depth for the sake of clarity? Some moments break this pattern. Cho Chang's fractured relationship with Harry reveals that Ravenclaw students are capable of being antagonistic, not through house rivalry, but through emotional complexity. Similarly, Zachariah Smith from Hufflepuff in Order of the Phoenix is skeptical and abrasive, questioning Harry's account of Voldemort's return. These characters prove that antagonism need not be limited to Slytherin, and yet the narrative quickly reabsorbs them into the background, refusing to let such tensions grow into full-scale house conflicts. The simplification returns, as though the story could not sustain multiple rivalries without losing its central focus. One must also consider the legacy of the founders. Godric Gryffindor and Salazar Slytherin famously quarrelled, with Slytherin leaving Hogwarts after demanding stricter admission standards based on blood purity. This historical rupture is embedded into the school's very foundation, ensuring that their houses will forever be in tension. The legend of the Chamber of Secrets, the Basilisk, and the Heir of Slytherin all serve to reinforce this feud across centuries. By contrast, no such dramatic backstory exists between Gryffindor and the other founders, leaving their houses free from inherited enmity. In this sense, the narrative is not artificially constructed, but inherited from the lore of the school itself. And yet, one cannot shake the feeling that the intensity of the feud is maintained for convenience. It gives Gryffindor a clear villain within the school walls, ensuring that conflict drives the plot, even when Voldemort is absent. The readers, like Harry, always know where danger lurks: Slytherin corridors, Slytherin Quidditch tactics, Slytherin schemes. It is an easy narrative device, but perhaps too easy. Life at Hogwarts would feel richer, more unpredictable, had there been shifting alliances and unexpected rivalries. Instead, the world is reduced to a stage where Gryffindor and Slytherin endlessly replay the quarrel of their founders. Ultimately, the question is not why Gryffindor often clashes with Slytherin, but why it does not clash with others. Perhaps this is a reflection of Harry's perspective, as the books are tightly bound to his point of view. We see his conflicts with Malfoy, his suspicion of Snape, his battles against Slytherin's legacy. We rarely witness disputes with Ravenclaw or Hufflepuff because Harry himself does not experience them as central to his journey. The bias is therefore not only in the school but in the narration itself, shaping our perception of the houses according to the hero's gaze. The simplification leaves readers with an unease. Was Hogwarts really a place of 4 equal houses, or merely a theatre for 2? Gryffindor shines in opposition to Slytherin, yet one wonders how different the series might feel had Ravenclaw's wit or Hufflepuff's loyalty become sources of genuine rivalry. Would Harry's story be richer, or would it lose the clarity of its moral tale? That is the uncomfortable question for Gryffindor, a house defined not only by bravery, but by the existence of a convenient enemy crafted so neatly that it may obscure the more complex reality of a school where every house should matter.